Welcome back. I was recently asked if I would give another tour of the Grocery Road Garden. Now, I would like to give tours of gardens that look perfect and beautiful with zero weeds, etc. But it's been really hot. And it was hot and wet, which got the weeds growing, and now it's been hot and dry, which has meant the weeds have kept growing and the plants don't look as good as they should. But it's remarkably resilient as a system. So, you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and give you a run and gun tour of the Grocery Road Garden so you can see what this looks like. This has been 1 year since we moved into our property, and it has been, let's see, probably about 10, 11 months since we started the Grocery Road Garden system last fall. So this is pretty good indicator of what it can do even in some rough conditions. So, well, let's go tour. We did a lot of pruning here and there earlier in the year, though you wouldn't know it. It's surprising how you can cut things back and have them grow again. Like this mulberry, this is crazy. You can see how it looks a little burned and unhappy and something's chewing it. But it's still put on a lot of growth, which means we're gonna have to either bend it back some, prune it back some, or something, because otherwise it's going to be too much tree for too little space. Plant that doesn't mind the heat. Cassava, this is a variety we have that has a lot of red in it. I'm not sure what variety it is. It doesn't produce roots that are quite as big by the time it freezes here, this variety, but I love it because it's very pretty. It's got a neat look to it. And you can see almost nothing touches cassava. Nothing wants to eat cassava. Got another mulberry here which had frozen to the ground or close to it and came back this year and grew at least 8 feet. It's got some issue with what appears to be a virus in the leaves. Not worried about it yet. We'll see what happens. Our cold hardy bananas here, even they've been burned by the heat. I mean, it's been running over 100. I came out here and sprayed everything with a hose the other day to give it a little water and to cool it off some. But you know, when your bananas look like that, they're starting to get burned, you know, you've got a problem with the heat. Same thing with this malanga, aka taro. These looked really big and lush early in the year, and they're putting out new leaves. The new leaves grow a little bit, they open up, and then they sunburn and they die back. That's just the way things go. That's why we plant a bunch of different things. Here, look. This is galangal, ginger. Look at how burned that is. I could have used some shade, but it looked really great until about a month ago, when the heat started kicking in, started really burning stuff up. This mulberry is very happy. This mulberry is so happy that it's invading my pathway, which means it's got to be cut back and bent back. We let the okras go to seed. They didn't like the heat either, and we had to go out of town for over a week. And you know, if you go out of town for over a week when your okra starts producing, you go from like a couple of okra pods to 1,000 okra pods to super hard okra pods in about 23 hours. Seems like. Pretty crazy. Biomass canna. That's a train. That's a train. This is the Rachel mulberry. This Rachel mulberry had frozen back. We had a very weird spring, you know, it was up in the 80s, and then suddenly it was a hard freeze, and the hard freeze really wrecked plants that should have been able to take it. Like a mulberry can take a freeze, but it can't take a freeze when it's actively growing and it's got fruit and green leaves all over it. We had weeks of warm, spring weather followed by a hard freeze. Totally not fair. It froze the mulberry back down to here, cracked the bark, caused all kinds of rot, and then it has grown back and has hit, 7.5 feet or so. Very happy, doing fine. Cassava's doing fine. This is one of the other varieties. This variety doesn't have as much red in it. This is a type I used to grow in North Florida. Kind of is closing in our pathways here. We put these cassava in around the tomatoes that we had earlier in the season. We've got multiple different varieties growing through here, and they're doing fine. They don't really mind the heat, and even the drought they don't really mind. They just don't care. Still getting watermelons from my son's landrace collection. This looks like it's pretty high on the Charleston Gray. It may even be a pure Charleston Gray. Before we go any further, I want to tell you that if you want to learn about grocery row gardening from me in person, I am going to be talking about it at Scrub Fest 2, which is in North Central Florida in a town called Orange Springs. It takes place at a beautiful food forest plant nursery with all kinds of cool rare plants. There's going to be other speakers there talking about a variety of gardening topics, and I want you to join me, so I will put a link to that below. All right, let's go back to the garden. Still making fruits. We've got over 750 pounds of watermelons so far this year from the ones that got planted in the grocery row. The ones that were planted in their own area in full sun produced a couple of watermelons. The ones in the grocery rows really went crazy, ran underneath everything else, acted as our ground cover. Kind of an aggressive ground cover, but a ground cover that produces watermelons, so the aggressiveness is okay. All right, let's start at the other side. We're in the 3rd and 4th row right now. This is Dioscorea, the edible variety of air potato, which you rarely see, and which cost a small fortune if you try to buy bulbils from them. Makes a really cool climber. It looked much better before it got so dry, but it's still doing well. And you can see we've got the bulbils growing. Very, very cool. You can eat these like potatoes. That's not the biggest one of them, but there's multiples over here. Late in the year, it makes a bunch of bulbils. Starts in the summer and then into the fall, and then all these vines will die back. These bulbils drop to the ground, and then they rest through the winter, and then in the spring they grow. This is why the wild forms of this are so aggressive. They have these long vines growing up through the trees, and then they turn around and they drop lots and lots of bulbils on the ground, and a little bit of fall leaves and stuff fall over them. Next thing you know, they've run 40 feet one year, they run 80 feet the next year, they run 60 feet the next year, and they just keep spreading their way through. Something that's very nice to see here, we're starting to see spiders show up all over the garden, which is a really good thing. That's a crab spider there that's enjoying eating a wasp, it looks like. We have wasps and spiders. Both of them are useful. The wasps go and hunt caterpillars, and the spiders hunt caterpillars, and the spiders eat all kinds of flies and stink bugs and all kinds of other things. And occasionally they kill and eat each other. I've seen wasps dragging paralyzed spiders across the ground, and I've seen now a spider eating a wasp. That's pretty impressive. But the more insects you have, the more balanced the system is. We actually don't have much insect damage in this system, and that's one of the wonders of planting a polyculture. If you just plant one thing and you have a bunch of one thing, it's like you spread out a great big meal for the insects, and you don't have space for all the predators to live. When you have different heights and different levels and many different species, it brings in more insects, and the insects balance each other out, so you don't have this problem where you've rolled out the welcome mat for one particular species and then they destroy everything. Right here we've got a plum that I started from seed. It was probably a year or two ago. and it's looking pretty good. It's always interesting to start trees from seed and see what you get. We just go to the nice market. There's a market down in Pensacola. It's called Everman's. They have different types of fruit there. It's usually organic. I'll go and buy different fruit, and then I'll tell the kids, look, you can eat this fruit, but you have to save the seeds. So they eat the fruit, we save the seeds, we stratify them or plant them out in sand beds or whatever, and then when we get plants, you know, from them, we plant them out in the yard, and then we get our own varieties of fruit trees. We've done this for years. Keep having to restart because we kept moving, we were renting and all kinds of other things. So actually having land that we own is a blessing. It's really good. This is a apple tree. This is the first apple tree that Rachel ever planted. It's looking good. It's happy. You know, it's taking the heat well. The mulch helps. There's mulch in these rows, but some stuff has gotten sunburned despite it. It's got a Dioscorea alata, a true yam that's climbing it right now, and if that yam gets too aggressive, I'm gonna have to cut it off because the apple is more important. I have lots of yams, but not a lot of apples. And there's only one apple that Rachel planted, so it's like super, super special. Here we've got tobacco seeds coming in. Tobacco makes these pods, and inside of the pod are thousands of seeds. See that dust? That is tobacco seeds. That is really kind of ridiculous how small they are. It's an incredible pain in the neck to get them to grow and germinate because they dry out so quickly. But yeah, we've definitely got tobacco seeds now. There are insects that get into some of the pods and eat all the seeds out of them, but despite that, we've got seeds. Maybe some of them will self-seed next year and I won't have to plant them again. Got more cassava. Got some, this is a avocado. That must have come out of the compost. That's kind of funny. And this is a black walnut, which planted itself. When this goes to sleep, I will pot it up, put it somewhere else. We still got some remnants of zinnias. We had a windstorm that knocked over our stick trellis here. It was so beautiful, but it had vines all over it. And windstorm came through here and just blew it completely sideways. Ripped the vines up. Took the whole thing down. But I have bulbils on it, which were big enough that we can save them for next year to plant, but that's kind of disappointing. It was doing really, really well, but we had these winds come sideways. They actually pushed some of my, they even pushed my T-post trellises. Really crazy. I like T-post trellis pushed sideways. You can hear the ducks right now. The ducks have been wandering through the garden. I let them out. There's not much they can damage right now because we don't have any little baby seedlings or freshly planted areas. They can come through and help themselves to the bugs and whatever fallen tomatoes are left and things like that. I don't care. They could just wander through. I got tired of looking at them caged up. It's like, what if there were ducks in the grocery road? Let's let them out. It's fun to see them. I like ducks. I mean, ducks seem to have a little more character than chickens, I guess. Now I have my pocket full of bulbils. This is sugar cane, looking really good here. We do get some pests. I mean, this is right here, see? Got a grasshopper. A one-legged grasshopper. A grasshopper that was unlucky. Something's tried to eat him already. And he's eating some stuff. I don't really care. They're not that big a pest. Some of you guys, you deal with if you're next to a field, it gets real dry and the grasshoppers just start marching and going across everything and destroying it. That can be a problem. Here we don't really have those kind of issues. We've got pasture around here where the cows keep it pretty mowed, and we don't really have a place, I guess, for them to build up into pest amounts. The hot peppers are still doing well. We've gotten more hot peppers than we need. You know, we made a lot of hot pepper sauce a year or so ago. So we've still got hot pepper sauce from a year or so ago because we made over a gallon of it. That's really enough hot pepper sauce. So I'm not even really bothering with that much. We eat some fresh, and you know, whatever, they fall on the ground sometimes. This is our Dioscorea alata. You can see the storm also knocked the top rail out of this, but the vines have held up the rail. It's actually floating in there, and it's okay. This is the Connor Crickmore trellis system. I found out that Connor Crickmore of Never Sink Farm, I wrote him to find out where this trellis had come from. It didn't come from Josh Satin originally. It came from Connor Crickmore from Never Sink Farms, which is he's got a very good YouTube channel, very cool farm setup with really smart systems. But he was using this system long before it got called the trellis to make you jealous. So I did a little bit of research, and that's where we are. It is the Connor Crickmore trellis, so far as we know. And he said that he'd been using the system, and he probably borrowed some of the ideas from somebody else, but it's been 15 years, something along those lines. So there you go. You never know when you start digging. All right, we'll go and shoot through the last row. I'll magically transport to the beginning of it. It's always amazing to me that that works. I think one of these days I'm going to end up inside a wall or something, you know? So here we are. We've got a seedling chestnut, which is also burned by the heat. The lantana around the base of it doesn't mind. It's just growing crazy. It's basically a weed. Goji berries have been chewed up, but they'll be fine again. They get chewed up and they die back when it gets hot, and then they come out just fine. On the other side here, you can see the more galangal ginger, which has been burned, and it's around that pomegranate tree right there. We have the Premier One fencing. You can see in the background, that's where we keep the ducks. I'm not that impressed with it. It's really saggy. It's kind of a pain in the neck. I would much rather have a real physical boundary, I think, than that stuff. I understand people like to move it around and everything, but I don't like it very much. It's kind of expensive, pain in the neck, sags, it discharges electricity into the ground all the time. Nah. Give me a simple solution any day. Mulberry's looking good. Turmeric is getting burned. Okay, let's look at the other side of these yams here. These guys, they are super dense. There's levels and levels of yam vines inside of here. They've gotten like into dense hedge territory. This whole set of vines is sagging from the windstorm sideways. The posts underneath are actually tilting out at like a 15-degree angle right here. It was about hurricane winds for a little bit, and that was a few months ago, but it was enough to really kind of cause a mess, and I kicked some things back up and propped some things back up and hoped for the best. But I mean, they went through it, but when the trellises have this much mass on top, they're like a sail, so the wind really had a lot to push on. If it had just been the trellis with nothing on it, it wouldn't have been a problem. But when you get winds, when you have a lot of weight on the top plus all of this leaf mass to catch it, it's like blowing against a wall of green, and it pushed it sideways. Our Rugosa roses here, these are for rose hips. They have not made hips yet, but they've started blooming for the first time. Had some blooms on here. I don't think they like this heat very much. They were really nice and green and dense earlier, but it's rough. I told you this is the way it looks. It's kind of crazy, and you can see which things can take the heat and which things can't. The cassava don't care. The yams don't really care much. They might have grown faster if it hadn't been for it, but they're still growing. The cannas do mind. They've gotten torn up and ugly. Hot pepper does not mind. This is a Tabasco, which I really should come out and harvest some. This is kind of ridiculous how many peppers are on here. I should make my own Tabasco pepper sauce. This is This is kind of sad. I mean, that's just one pepper plant. Could make some pepper vinegar or something for the collards that we can't grow right now. When we do get around to having collards. This is a habanero pepper. I don't know if we've got any good ones on here. We've got some that are drying out. Habanero. I think the ducks would probably eat it. Hey, ducks! There they go, yeah. They are eating it. They don't taste spiciness. Ducks don't. Look it up, it's science. It's real. This is another seedling plum. Some of the stone fruit can actually fruit really quickly. We started peaches from seed. We got lots of good fruit off of them. And actually one of them started blooming for the first time at 18 months. Crazy. From a pit. And then at 2 years we got a few peaches. At 3 years we got a bunch of peaches. Pretty good. Now one thing that you can't see here is, yeah, we're not growing any real greens right now, except we eat a lot of the sweet potato greens. But you know, a lot of the stuff that's growing here is making a bunch of roots beneath the ground. This is one of those things about gardening in the deep south when it gets really hot and just miserable, and it goes back and forth between being droughty and being rainy, is that you just don't get a lot of greens or things through the summer unless you've got some tropical stuff. I have some tropical stuff that I grow in pots in my plant nursery. I have not planted greens out in this system because we didn't get to it this year. There are some summer greens. We usually don't grow them. Right now, once we've got out all of our spring and early summer vegetables, you know, our carrots, and we get lots and lots of green herbs, and we get daikons, and we get our collards and cabbages and broccoli and things like that. When you get that stuff earlier in the year, then it gets hot and brutal. These heavy root producing crops are still doing fine, and we get to fall and we get this gigantic harvest of roots, which gets us through the winter. So we'll get our cassava and our yams and our taro and our sweet potatoes all at once. There will be hundreds of pounds of roots. So these plants are still growing us food. It's just we're having to wait for them until later on. And it's, I love the end of the year when things get calmer, as in it's not 100 degrees out, so I'm gonna call that calmer. When things get cooler and feel calmer, that's when we come out here and we get all our pathways cleaned up and, you know, bend our perennials sideways and do all the stuff that we need to do. Here, look, now I've told you that comfrey does poorly here in the heat. This one is in the shade. Look at how sad it looks. This is not a good summer chop and drop. It is kind of self-dropping. You know, this is all making fertility that goes into the ground, but early in the year that thing was this big ball and it was rich and thick and it looked great, and now it is not. It just doesn't thrive. And the ones that I had out in the open, many of them have simply died completely. You pull it up and the root is just this little black piece of rot. Not, you know, it's not perfect for every climate. More sugar cane, and we're pretty much coming to the end of it. I've got other things, but it's kind of looks like it's procedurally generated. You know, you got a yam, you got some asparagus, and you got some cassava, and you got another mulberry, and it goes row to row to row. So that's what we're looking at right now. We've got roots coming in. We don't have a lot of greens except for all the sweet potato leaves, which are scattered all about, and we can get lots out of there. There are weeds that are coming in, like this spurge and this grass that's creeping through here. All that gets dealt with when it gets cooler. Right now we just are happy that we have anything alive and that we're gonna have a nice big fall harvest of some sugar canes and some roots. And the fruit trees are, you know, very young, so they're not doing anything yet. In future years we'll get fruit through the summer, which will be wonderful. We'll get some persimmons and peaches and apples and pears and figs, Lord willing, and all that stuff grows through here. But right now this is the way a summer garden is in Alabama, and this is actually quite lush. compared to many gardens that I've seen. So the polyculture, the extra shade, it's wonderful. I am going to be talking about this system at Scrub Fest, which is in North Central Florida. North Central Florida, October 14th, Scrub Fest. I will be there. Multiple other speakers will be there. It's going to be fantastic. And it also takes place at a plant nursery that has a lot of rare species and food forest. Just food forest plants like you would not believe. And there will be a sale going on at that nursery. While we're doing presentations on all kinds of different systems, you get to meet a lot of good gardeners, etc. If you want to sign up for that, kids are free. Adults are $50. It's a whole day, and you can get all kinds of nursery plants, learn tons of stuff. We'll have books and t-shirts and all kinds of people you can meet. I will put a link to that below. Scrub Fest. Our first Scrub Fest 1 was last year. It did awesome. People loved it. A lot of people from the first year are coming back to the second year, and we hope that you will join us for the first time if you haven't come last time. If you're in the area, or if you want to drive a few hours, it's totally worth it. Scrub Fest 2, I will put a link below. And if you want to learn about this grocery row system from reading my little booklet, I will put a link to the grocery row gardening below. Thanks for joining me. It's been a little hard to get videos done when it's been so hot and miserable, but thanks for the suggestion that we go on a tour. You can see what things look like in real life right now, and maybe it'll inspire you to plant your own grocery row garden. I'm happy. Stuff out in the yard's dying, the grass is turning brown, I've still got green in here. That's a win for me. Catch you next time, and until then, may your thumbs always be green.
Discover the beauty and efficiency behind grocery row gardening. Create a backyard where fruits, herbs, vegetables, and flowers all grow together within proper spacing. In grocery row gardening, you'll find the tools and systems you need to keep your family fed.
Buried my rabbit beneath the cherry tree one fine afternoon. Someday I know that we'll meet again on a fruit salad spoon. Laid my hamster to rest last night beneath the pumpkin vine. Someday I know that we'll meet again in a Thanksgiving pie.
All right, let's start at the other side.